To George Osborne, who, as I said, has to leave us now, but wishes us well. Now, for those of you just joining our live stream, you're very welcome to this London Evening Standard business event in association with ABP. I'm Georgina Godwin, and we're here at the Royal Albert Dock. Now, we'd like to welcome the Mayor of Newham, who is Roxana Fears, to the stage. Roxana, thank you.
Welcome to Newham, everyone, and it's really thrilling to have such a business-minded and eclectic audience come to, would you believe, my council offices. I'm the new mayor of Newham. I'm actually 4.5 months old. And I wanted to just pick up on something that George Osborne said as part of his introductory remarks. He talked about having grown up in West London and how he always knew that East London was where it is at. I, having grown up in Newham, always knew that East Londoners had an edge over West Londoners. And even more so, Newham absolutely rocks, just as their new mayor. Mayor of Newham. Newham rocks. I'm going to keep my contributions brief. Suffice to say this. I stood on a platform of ensuring that people in the London Borough of Newham were at the heart of everything that we do as a council. And part of my philosophy is appropriating that concept and that approach that it takes a village to bring up a child, and that village comprises of many family members, including our local schools, our youth hubs, our hospitals, our shopping malls, but more importantly, our businesses. Businesses in Newham are welcome. Businesses in Newham have a vital role to play in the next chapter of the Newham story, which I will be leading at least for the next 4 years. And when I reflect on the new story of Newham, I reflect on my experience growing up in this borough. And I have been prompted by someone who asked me, but what is Newham for now? And it made me think about my upbringing. I grew up in this borough. I went to school in this borough. My first job was in this borough. Would you believe I had my first job gig at McDonald's in East Ham High Street, and now I've progressed to this. But I grew up and I didn't have the wealth of opportunities that are available in this borough now, and that will be coming up through significant developments taking place in the Royal Docks, including the important development being delivered by a significant company called ABP, which are hosting this event. And I grew up and I had aspiration, I had ambition, I wanted to spread my wings, but I chose to spread my wings and fly outside of this borough. But given all the opportunities that have emerged since the Olympics, and given all the opportunities that are emerging because of developments being driven by significant companies such as ABP, given the fact that Newham and its geographical location as being London's gateway to the world, and the fact that Newham is the world, we are the most diverse population of any local authority in this country. We have the youngest youth population profile. I was saying earlier on to George that in the next 15 years, we will have more young people than we will have older people. And just think about the amazing talent pool that that presents, that can access all the job opportunities, that can harness their creativity to help businesses grow, be they domestic businesses or be they international businesses. So for me, Newham is the world. and what I want to ensure in partnership with all the businesses that are going to be coming to the Royal Docks, in collaboration with a deep partnership that's been forged with ABP and the new administration being led by me. And I'm pleased that we, myself and Nancy, who leads the European operations, have got off to a very good start. That Noom is a place where a child or any person can spread their wings and fly, and you don't have to leave this borough. So I'm looking forward to the debates with some of our leading experts that have been helping us think about how we project this part of London to the world. And I'm looking forward to working with all of our business partners here to make East London really kick and shine in the world. Thank you very much.
Very, very many thanks to Madam Mayor for your remarks and also for welcoming us to Newham, to your borough. One more keynote before we start our panel. Please welcome to the stage Rajesh Agrawal, who's Deputy Mayor of London for Business.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And it's, first of all, it's great being here at the Royal Docks. I was here in April for the topping out ceremony. And every time I've been in this part of the city, every time there are so many different changes, and it's very, very thrilling to see. I can actually foresee this area re-emerging as a hub of global trade, a role that Royal Docks actually played between mid-1800s and 1970s. And I would like to thank our co-host ABP for the part that they are actually playing in doing that. Not only are the Royal Docks an ideal destination for Asian investment, connectivity to global markets will make Royal Docks once again the gateway for export. And with the delivery plan for the area having recently been signed off by the London Economic Action Partnership and the Mayor, this will further boost the capacity of the area in becoming not only an important business destination, but also a key part to the capital's cultural life. I'm delighted to see so many different business leaders here tonight. After all, I'm also a businessman. Before I became the Deputy Mayor for Business, I set up and grew a successful fintech business here in London. I only came to London about 17 years ago. It would actually be 17 years this month. And I still remember the day when I landed at Heathrow Airport. I had never been on a plane before. I had never been outside India before. And I did not know anybody in the UK. I came here with £200 in my pocket. But I worked, found a job, worked in a foreign exchange business for 3 years, then set up my own business just with a laptop. And that business went on to become one of the fastest growing companies in the country. And of course, one thing I never thought when I first landed at Heathrow Airport, that I'll end up as the Deputy Mayor of the greatest city in the world. So that's what London is all about. London is truly a city of opportunities. I know firsthand from my experience it's the best city in the world in which you can start and grow a business. And my office is actually not far from here. It's in Canary Wharf. And I know in the last 30 years how much it has changed. Last 17 years that I've been in this city, how much transformation I've actually seen. The mayor always talks about that he wants to be the most pro-business mayor ever. And he does this by supporting businesses to grow, because he knows that if you can help businesses to grow, both London and Londoners will benefit. And whilst London's economic growth is expected to increase in the coming years, this cannot be taken for granted because of factors such as Brexit and global competition. But the mayor and I will continue to do everything in our power to create conditions not just for growth, but also good growth, as well as enabling innovation to improve productivity. Helping innovation to flourish requires putting in place a supportive environment for business across the whole of economy. From investment in skills, research and infrastructure, including digital infrastructure, to providing finance and business support for startups, small and medium-sized businesses, and to attract international investment. At City Hall, we are passionate about helping small and medium businesses to start, sustain, and grow. Almost 2 years ago at City Hall, we launched the London Growth Hub, an online portal that includes tools that aim to support startups and SME businesses with everything from finding workspaces to finding out about network events and resources. We also have a business growth program, which, as the name suggests, it's helping businesses to grow, bringing businesses together, because I know from running my own business, it's of huge value when businesses come together and they network with each other. In fact, this afternoon we had a fantastic business growth program event. But once the businesses start growing and they start exporting and they are ready to internationalize, that's when our Mayor's International Business Program comes into play. It helps them starting to export. It helps them through the trade missions. And these programs, some of these programs are run by London and Partners, which is London's official promotional agency, which of course I chair. London and Partners, and my job is also to champion the interest of London businesses and to promote London worldwide, and making sure that everybody in the world know that London is the best place, whether you want to visit as a tourist, whether you want to set up a business, whether you want to expand your business. So sometimes I feel like I'm a traveling salesman, traveling around the world, selling London. But promoting London now is more important than ever in the context of Brexit. But I promise you, I know this for a fact, that regardless of what happens, London will always continue to remain an open, outward-looking, global, multicultural, and cosmopolitan city, and a global capital for business and finance. Because London's business ecosystem is hard to replicate. It has an incredible creative energy and free thinking that has defined it as a leading capital for innovation, business, culture, and openness. And this foundation has been built over a long period of time. But the real asset of London is Londoners. People from around the world come to London and make this city their home. And that is the greatest asset of this city. What the mayor is doing to support businesses to thrive in London, we are amplifying that in the Royal Docks area. And it also has an added advantage that it's the London's only enterprise zone. The Royal Docks team is a joint initiative between the Mayor of London and the Mayor of Newham. The team will be delivering several projects to ensure businesses will thrive, including increasing the provision of workspace, supporting the development and retention of SMEs, as well as developing an ambitious employment and skills program to ensure that we have got the right kind of skills for the workforce. Skills, after all, is one of the most important things in the future. I come from a tech background. I was a tech entrepreneur, and I know this, how quickly technology is changing the world. And unless we adopt to this changing technology, there's no chances for us growing economically. There's an old Chinese saying that when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and some people build windmills. We are the one that should be building windmills, and which basically means is with the changing technology, we get the right kind of skills for our workforce. So look, this is a very once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to revive this area. Royal Docks will change the fortunes of this area, and we are very, very excited about it. We are very happy to partner with the Mayor of Newham, and thank you very much for listening, and have a lovely, very productive evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rajesh, and I think you two have to go. But I expect that there will be some coverage in a major newspaper that you can read about the event in tomorrow. Thanks very much to all of our keynote speakers. Now, moving on to our main panel event of the evening. So it's a discussion on future-proofing businesses here in our great capital city. I'd like to introduce James Ashton, who's our chair for tonight's proceedings. He's a business commentator and a media consultant. He's a former city editor and executive editor of the Evening Standard, and he now writes and speaks about the economy, business, leadership, and technology. James will introduce the rest of the panel, but please first give him a big welcome.
Thanks so much, Georgina. Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's great to be here. Given the backdrop, given all the development we can see out of the window, I'm a little bit ashamed to say I've not been in this part of London for a little while. I have a very, very strong memory, though, of a trip down the sewage tunnel at Beckton a couple of years ago. Fortunately, it wasn't functioning at that time. But I think what is in common between that piece of infrastructure and this, as to what the Royal Albert Dock will become thanks to the ABP investment, is these are both pieces of infrastructure crucial to the smooth running and development of a world-class city like London. And that's what we're talking about tonight, investing in the future, what London needs to do, the global competition, the global race, and so on. How can companies get ahead of the curve with all the new technologies that Rajesh talked about just now? What will businesses look like in a generation? How does London innovate to keep its global crown? And what about the role of East London in all this, in attracting great talent, in being a proving ground, bringing in investment and new ideas, as it is obviously doing. We want to open this up to the audience as soon as we can, but to begin with, to help me pull apart some of these issues, three wise heads on the panel. From my left, Rohit Talwar. He's a futurist and CEO of Fast Future. He helps business clients deal with the problems of tomorrow and how to shape their strategy accordingly. In the center, Joy Nazari. She's the founding director of DN & Co. Her design consultancy is inspired by culture and place. She's been involved in the reinvention of St James's, Television Centre, Broadgate Circle, and is currently consulting here on the dock. And finally, Bob Doyle, another travelling salesman, I think. That was the definition, wasn't it? Yeah. So Bob Doyle is the money man tonight. He's head of inward investment at London & Partners. He's been attracting FDI, foreign direct investment, to the UK and latterly London since 2002. Rohit, I'll start with you. Before we get into the London story, the speakers earlier talked about the pace of change and so on. And if you're planning for the future, if you're a CEO now, how on earth do you plan for the future when there's so much happening today?
I think that's always been the case.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, the pace of change is such that if we don't think about the future and what's shaping the next wave of change, we're kind of guaranteeing what the next crisis will be. Mm-hmm. And if we look around us, there are a set of forces coming together that are shaping the future that we have to respond to. One is clearly Brexit. There's going to be something play out there. The next is, the sheer scale of innovation going on across the planet, the investment in artificial intelligence that is reshaping industry after industry. Our partners here tonight from China, the Chinese government is spending $429 billion on investment in AI at national, regional, and local level, with the view of being the world leading innovator in that. There's also an opportunity for London in that those businesses created in China will want to come somewhere as their foothold for Europe and for the rest of the world. This may be the location for them. We're also seeing sort of big global initiatives that are going to change trade patterns. So again, China's behind the One Belt, One Road initiative, $7 trillion being poured into infrastructure in 52 countries, completely reshaping the economic prospects of countries like Romania. All of this is shaping the landscape. And there is a concern that Brexit, automation, all those things might lead to job reduction, and that's very real. Mm-hmm. The other side of that is we kind of know that once the dust has settled on Brexit, one of the core pillars of strategy will be to reduce corporate taxes, to reduce investment taxes, personal taxes. It's kind of a guaranteed. It's a dirty little secret that no one wants to make public. But you go around the world and people are just waiting for that. Wealthy investors, corporates are just waiting for those tax rates to come down and come to Britain. So I actually think we're going to see even greater demand for skills in the capital. I'm not talking about the rest of the country. So we have a challenge now, which is how do we prepare for all this? And I think the core of the challenge is around skills. Every year about $800 billion is wasted on IT projects, and over half of that is due to poor digital literacy. And I think the first thing we have to do is to think about raising literacy at executive level, so we understand what it is we're buying into and how these technologies don't just change the way you do business, they change the rules of the game. Managers and staff in the organization having the kind of digital literacy and social skills to be able to work with the new technologies and learn new jobs as some of their jobs might get displaced. And finally, the tech developers, taking them to the next level so they can really make all this tech sing. So I think we've got some critical priorities here now in London. One is massively raising the skills level. We don't know what jobs our kids will be doing in 5 years' time. We have no idea what jobs people will be doing in that development in 3 years' time, let alone 5 years' time. So we have to develop the social skills in people, problem solving, collaboration, design thinking, all those skills that will help people move from job to job. Secondly, I think if London really wants to win in this game and guarantee it, we just need to have the fastest broadband, ideally in the world, but certainly in Europe. Businesses will come if they have the infrastructure to support what they're going to be doing in the digital economy. And if we're creating the skills base. So to me, there are some obvious winning strategies. Businesses have to get a mastery of these technologies. They have to look at the investment they're making in their people and say, is it enough? Because what we don't want to be is in a situation where we can't innovate because we don't have the skills to do it. That we can't think our way around how our industry is changing. We can't think our way around how to find opportunities in the reshaping of a sector. And that requires people who are innovative, talented, good problem solvers. So I think those elements are critical for any business leader who wants to make sure that we're moving into the future.
So we've come off this time of cheap money, markets at highs this side, both sides of the Atlantic. I mean, are you saying that in order to sort of retool for the next generation, shareholders have to take the foot off the pedal, CEOs have to say we've got to spend more or else we're going to be extinct?
Well, there are choices there. It's whether you feel lucky punk, about not, not betting on skills and just hoping that by, pushing the needle even, pushing people even harder to deliver today, whether that's the right strategy or whether just taking a slight pause to say, let's make a bigger investment in skills and development and in thinking, whether that's actually going to accelerate us for the longer term.
Yeah.
And I think it's a bit of a fallacy that your business suffers if people train. I mean, we invest in training in our business. I notice no reduction in productivity, but what I notice is after the training, people do jobs far more effectively and they set their own training agendas. I think there's a tendency as well to try and sort of make all the decisions from the top. I think the real challenge for London and leaders in London in the next 5 years is learning to let go and learning to trust their staff a lot more and have them set their own training agendas, have them drive their own skills agenda, because as individuals, we will all have to take much more responsibility for thinking about our own skills and how we find our next job or how we create our next job. Because I think that's the other piece that doesn't get talked about much. Small to medium businesses are the kind of the heart of the economy. And if we look to the future, big businesses will automate a lot more. They will have a lot less people. We're already seeing entirely digital businesses being born with no employees. So we have to really be thinking about how we can encourage the growth of new enterprises and giving people the skills to start their own businesses.
Yeah.
That's where I think the priority has to be.
And those businesses could be based anywhere, but they have to be based somewhere. So that's where, London has to step forward.
I think, well, obviously the people in London you hope will start their businesses here.
Yeah.
Hopefully will attract others. And it's about creating communities. In this kind of development, creating a community where you're surrounded by other ambitious, forward-thinking, caring, sustainably minded businesses is just infectious. And it gets you thinking differently about how do I take my business forward. And that's what we want to do, is we want to create these very vibrant places where people can start businesses, learn from other innovators, and constantly feel like they're in an environment where there's a huge opportunity to grow. And one of the things I hope, and I haven't read the plan, is that I hope that ABP will be like a gateway to a lot of these businesses into China, but also somehow tap them into the One Belt, One Road project, because there's so much opportunity out there. We just have to target our lens, to find it.
Yeah.
And I hope that, you know, part of ABP's strategy is really about putting in place that enablement strategy so that the businesses from here get to the point where they can't stay here anymore because they're just too big. But also you help them grow and extend around the world, because I think, you know, you have a lot of value to add for them in that way.
Bob, I mean, clearly businesses in future go where investment is being made, and that sort of makes them confident to put in the investment themselves. I mean, you've been selling London and the UK out there for a long time. What are the key things that attract an investor to a country or a business, or a city or a region?
Yeah, the way we think about it is convergence. So convergence of manufacturers that make a location attractive. In London's case, I mean, it's actually quite a small geographical, physical space. But what's wonderful about London, it has access to amazing industry networks in one place, access to government regulators, access to great talent, of course. And we have 50 universities, so there's great research and development going on here as well. And wonderful transport links, which are only growing, with Elizabeth Line coming through here as well very soon. So there's a confluence of lots of things coming together, which make it a very attractive proposition. It's the only sort of truly global centre within Europe, I believe. And certainly for financial services, there's really only London and New York, and everybody else is kind of catching up. But you know, there are some very strong fundamentals about London, which have been there for, you know, as we said before, a very long time, and which are difficult to replicate. And I think that's what keeps people interested in thinking about London.
Now, I never like to be the first person to say the B word on a panel, but as soon as you've already gone there.
Yeah.
What has changed when you're out selling London post-Brexit?
I mean, it can vary from market to market. In the case of China, I'm pleased to say that I don't think Chinese businesses, both large and SMEs as well, don't have any particular concerns about Brexit. In fact, many see it as a great opportunity for the future. There isn't the sort of existential angst that we see here in Britain and in Europe about it. I think we are seeing opportunity, what could happen in the future. Maybe the economy here will be easier to access and to do business.
And Rohit's point about tax, and I see that I think the latest Savills figures show that, you know, quite how much the South Koreans particularly putting into the office market, so there's a lot. What about things like connectivity? I mean, we have so much to offer, but I think anyone that lives and works here would say the Wi-Fi, the broadband, all that could be better. Yeah,
I think, I mean, no matter where you are in major business centres, there's always some issue about infrastructure. But I do think at a city level we're doing everything we can to address these things, and certainly the private property sector, of which ABP is very much part of, have a part to play there as well to make sure that we have the most world-beating business spaces available.
Joy, given the work that you're doing involved here and other places I know, just interested, right before we're talking about London, in general, why do you think place has become so important in modern business? You know, business is global, it's digital. You know, we could all be communing in a field on VR headsets tonight, but we're not, we're here.
Yeah.
So why is place so important?
So I think that there are quite a few different sides to it. The first is to say places of any scale are in some sort of economic competition, right? So Excel is a great example. It doesn't compete with necessarily London venues for events. It competes internationally for their mega events. I was really surprised to hear, you know, they pull in they affect £4.5 billion worth of business tourism into the country, which is a pretty mega thing. So place, I think for me is very much about a whole heap of things. So one is who, skills-wise, who can we bring in from a business perspective? Two, you know, who can we rub up against from a serendipity perspective? What businesses are around us? Can we network with them, as you say? So I think that's really, really important. I think what fascinates me overall is I started actually in tech in Silicon Valley, and in finance in the days of the dot-com boom. And actually, I've sort of gone sort of the other way, which is tech is probably doing something interestingly, connecting us digitally, but not connecting us physically. So where I'm really fascinated is, what are we doing in our places that's actually allowing me to sit next to Rohit and have a conversation, which is like, do you know, I didn't know that, Rohit, that's really fascinating. And so for me, we actually, as much as we hold technology up very high and how much you can, I have, you know, a client in Australia, I have clients in San Francisco, and I can meet them on Skype. we actually can't really replace that incredible thing that happens when we meet and physically have a chat with people face to face, and I think people crave that. So transport, connectivity, cross-rail, all of these things are increasingly important as sub-markets in London perhaps become less relevant. Traditional finance districts in London aren't just traditional finance districts anymore, they're really changing. So our notion of place is really changing. Brexit, it means we have to adapt how we communicate place. I think, actually, really interestingly, one of my favorite things, probably the only nice thing that I liked after Brexit that happened, was London and Partners reacted really quickly with a fantastic message, which was London is open, to sort of really quickly say, don't let Brexit redefine what this place means to us. We're still global. We're international. People are coming here. Ratchet started a business. This American Brazilian started a business. So I think that notion of places it really means something to people.
In a very extreme way, that was a great piece of marketing.
It was, and that is ultimately their job, right? It is to,
of course,
on a London stage, to really market London. It was a brilliant piece of marketing.
Rohit, you were nodding there, talking about the sense of place. I mean, you can only see that getting more important in the future. There's nothing better than a city.
Well, and I completely buy into what Joy was saying, that there is this kind of tendency at the moment to think that it's all about tech. And certainly larger businesses are beginning to understand that most of their innovation, they source from externally. Internally, people are doing big processes more of the time. More and more people are doing routine work. Even if you get to leadership level, your job is still pretty routine. And so you can actually be automated. The interesting bit is the new ventures coming through who are all about people, all about connection and creativity. And if there's a kind of underlying story at the moment of innovators from around the world coming to London to connect with other innovators. I'll give you a very simple story. Last week I was at the nationalisation ceremony for two friends of mine who've come over from Silicon Valley, and they've been here 9 years, but the reason they came is that they wanted to connect with people of all sorts of ideas, all sorts of cultural backgrounds from around the world. He's a leading kind of digital AI developer for one of the companies that's hoping to transform healthcare at Babylon, and she's one of the leading thinkers and practitioners in women-focused investment and social investment around the world. But both of them wanted to be here because they thought this was where the action really was if you wanted to connect to people and change agents. And I think that's the really interesting piece. We are going to see jobs go to technology, but we're going to see new ones being created. And I think the challenge for London is to really stand up and say, this is a place where people can create, can imagine, can acquire the skills to develop the next generations of business and do it in a way that creates real cultural connectivity. I think there's a fear at the moment that as a society we're becoming slightly isolated, all the nationalistic nonsense around Brexit. And I think wherever you go now, I'm seeing a desire in London for people to find new ways of connecting, to get past that and start to embrace more human values. And we have a book coming out next month. I'm not here to promote that, by the way, but
it's called A Very Human
it's
Future.
$12.95. It's called A Very Human Future on Amazon and nowhere else. But in that, the point we make is that humans have to survive in a digital world, and you don't just want them to survive. You want them to thrive. So you have to make some very conscious choices about how you create that environment. Everything from the skills agenda that we've talked about to learning how to lead in the digital world to dealing with mental health. We have huge, dirty little secrets around things like 300,000 people quitting work last year because of stress. So we have to think about new models for how we run our business, new people-centered models for how we organize, how we connect. And that can be the heart of this city, and that can be a story that I don't hear many other cities telling at the moment. Everywhere we go, and I travel to a lot of places every year, the story is all about how they're going to be the digital leaders. But there isn't much more behind that about the culture they're creating, the connectivity they're creating between people, the cultural experiences they're creating, and the quality of life. And I think we can do all of those here.
But to your point, I mean, even the big tech companies are saying, technology will only get you so far. I mean, the Tim Cook speech a few months ago when he said, actually, I probably use my phone too much, was a bit like the boss of Diageo standing up saying he's been hitting the bottle. I just thought it was quite an interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
that there is more than tech. It is that humanity.
there is, but the 5 biggest companies by valuation in the world now are Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Facebook. They are tech companies, and they've just pulled away from the rest of the pack. So, as much as you might hear Facebook saying, "Oh, don't use Facebook quite so much," and Apple saying, "Don't use a phone quite so much," their rate of product introduction hasn't changed. The pressure on their sales forces to generate new revenues hasn't changed. They are going to be pushing further and faster, and Apple's transition from $1 trillion valuation to $2 trillion will be less than half the time it took them to go from 0 to $1 trillion. Because of the role that technology is playing in all our lives. We have to understand that. But we then have to make very conscious choices about how we're going to shape our future and our business in a world where there is a temptation to make everything tech-centric.
Okay. Bob, when you're selling London, are you selling the whole piece? Do you have to go into the story about clusters, either of technology or, at this point that London is a network of villages?
Absolutely. We think about clusters at a high level. Where we think of ourselves as excelling in creative industries and what we call urban, which is smart cities as well, financial and business services, and in innovation and life sciences. That's at a high level what we're most interested in. But we welcome people from every industry, if I'm honest. And yeah, there are kind of little villages around London where these things have arisen and have gotten stronger. So if we talk about fintech, I mean, surprisingly, it was at one point unthinkable for Canary Wharf to host an incubator to encourage fintech because it was seen as quite challenging to the traditional banking industry. And lo and behold, our most famous incubator, Level 39, is at the heart of Canary Wharf at 1 Canada Square. There's things like for innovation and life sciences, we have the wonderful, what we call the knowledge quarter around King's Cross and St. Pancras, which hosts lots of big institutions like Wellcome and the Crick Institute and UCL and others. So, I mean, again, I talked earlier about confluence, convergence. It is very important in a London context because these things they're close by, they're accessible, they're open as well. We're very welcoming in London. We don't believe in exclusivity. We want to encourage people from all over the world to get involved in these places and in these industries. And I think in terms of like the Royal Docks, I mean, I've been actually involved in the Royal Docks for quite some time, and it had to happen. I can remember a time when I used to kind of talk about Shoreditch and the city fringe as a really good place to go, really inexpensive, lots of property available. Now we're at the point where, the city fringe is more costly than the square mile, than the financial district, because it's been so successful with Tech City and all the rest. So it's only natural that businesses and institutions should look further east. We've some great things happening in Olympic Park. It's been repurposed. We have here east, which is being repurposed out of the old Media and Broadcast Centre. We have London's premier convention centre down here, Excel, and all the fantastic amenities around it. Transport's only getting better and better. So it made sense for better quality business space to also arise. That's why it's so exciting to see it here.
Do you? I think the ABP commitment here will probably be changing things. But have you found that there have been times when you had to work harder to get people to think outside of the central London? Absolutely.
Well, there's a time when Shoreditch would have been unthinkable. Now it's highly desirable. As I said, even more desirable than the city almost. So I think people's mindsets have changed a lot. I mean, George Osborne talked about London moving east. It has been for quite a while. We were growing very fast as a city. Our population was increasing. We now have many thousands of tech businesses that are here that didn't used to be. I can remember when Tech City was first talked about many years ago. I think actually it was in Evening Standard. There was a jokey article about how there was about 40 businesses around Old Street roundabouts, and we now count over 40,000 tech enterprises in London overall. So they have to go somewhere, and they can't all be in Shoreditch, which is a very small neighborhood.
And is it true? You mentioned Level 39, which is the fintech in Canary Wharf. Now, I'm sure I've written this, which doesn't, with hope means it was true, but there was overspill from Level 39, and they went 3 floors up, which for 80s pop band meant that Level 42 was brought back to life. That is true.
Absolutely true. Level 42 does indeed exist as a business space.
Joy, I think it might be helpful as we talk about, you know, future business and so on. The work you did on Broadgate Circle, that was about, you know, rethinking a space within London. How can that cater to a more diverse set of businesses, but also more sort of future-thinking businesses?
Yeah, and I think it's really relevant to what Bob's talking about. It's not just the circle, but it's actually the whole of Broadgate, which is 35 acres in the city of London. And historically, Broadgate's a really interesting story because it was actually what was at the time the dodgy end of the city. It was the bombed, undesirable end. And in the 80s, you needed to build, in effect, walls and sort of say, we're not near that, we're closed, we're a fortress, you know, finance, you're safe here. And actually, you know, you fast forward 40 years and we have a much different scenario where you're desperate to be open to Shoreditch and Silicon Roundabout, and you want to be open to Spitalfields. And so in that case, British Land and their partners GIC said, you know, we need to sort of have a little bit of a rethink 40 years later of the purpose of this place. And really it is that human factor that I'm quite interested in, is not just what do innovation businesses want out of a place, which, let's be honest, is not that sort of corporate world. They want something different, so that's sort of obvious. But what came out of the research that was super fascinating was, hey, you know what? The banks don't want all that stuffy corporate stuff either. And that allowed, and I think gave a lot of room for shifting an operational model there that talks towards where innovation and finance meet, quite physically, play. So the really interesting thing I think about innovation businesses as well is we think that they're sort of obsessed with, you know, beards and tattoos and, you know, having a beer in you know, some cool bar in Shoreditch. The reality is what they're really thinking about is where their next round of finance is going to come. So how fascinating to have a place like Broadgate, which is like the Gordon Gekko era 80s finance institution place, suddenly be saying, hey, you know, what if we put money and innovation in the same place to sort of have beer and play and have lots of open public space? It's the largest uninterrupted bit of public space, privately owned public space in central London, which is pretty fascinating. So it's really, really interesting case study.
But there was a time, I think, when, you know, Canary Wharf and Shoreditch seemed an awful long way away, sort of intellectually. There were the tribes of London that didn't mix. You know, you had Shoreditch techies, there was the bankers in Canary Wharf and the Square Mile, and the hedgies were over in Mayfair. And because of you know, the future seems to be that you know, the cities that will thrive are the melting pots that make the best use of their networks.
For sure. And look, I still think there's probably some interesting tension there. But probably one of the most interesting stats I really like is successful technology businesses that go on to float are basically, you know, they're not these wild child children that, you know, at 12 years old had this great idea and developed it, you know, outside of school. They are very often ex-management consultants, middle-aged, you know, ex-bankers, ex-finance people. And they need to look like grown-ups to their financiers, to their banks. And so they're sort of like, you know, where can I go for a place that actually my team and my staff can enjoy, be well connected, fast connected to wherever they live, east or west, but at the same time that I look like a grown-up to the people I'm getting money from.
And some of the techie startup bosses now wear you know, ties or very smart clothes, and of course the bankers don't.
No, the bankers are definitely shedding the ties more and more.
Yes, yeah. You talked about skills, Rohit. So where does that, is that about network effects as well? Is it about companies working more closely with institutions, with the 50 universities in London and so on? There seems to be a bit of a disconnect at the moment. You know, you can go into almost any you know, industry sector and they will always say, we have a skill shortage.
Yeah, it's definitely about a partnership between industry and, you know, local government as well. I think has a role to play to say what are the needs of businesses in our area, and then the education system. And partly it's about how do we get universities and colleges to tailor to the needs of businesses today and tomorrow, but it's also about what new models of delivery can we bring into the facilities we have. The average university meeting room or classroom is used about less than 20% of the time. And in the evenings, at the weekends, there's huge amounts of space there where you could go in and have people come in and teach you. And as much as we've talked a lot about tech ventures tonight, that's now. That's the next couple of years. We need to be thinking about the next waves of businesses that we want to create in London. So whether that's synthetic biology, engineering molecules that will clean up the environment, whether that's autonomous vehicles, 4D printed materials, all of the stuff going on around human augmentation, or social ventures, we need to be teaching people how to do that. And the arts, we're in an incredible situation now where you can get places in medical school through clearing, but there are 1,000 applicants for every place on a drama course. Our kids get what the changes are that's happening, and the arts, I think, is a sector that has to grow, because we will, ultimately people will have more leisure time. We need more painters, we need more musicians, we need more ballerinas, we need more actors. And the one I mentioned that I think is really important now is the kind of new wave of social ventures, teaching people how to do that. There are some incredible businesses here. There's one just outside London called Elvis and Crasser that I love at the moment. Some people may know them, they make very expensive handbags. The way they started their business, they went and they stood at a rubbish tip for 3 weeks and watched what was thrown away. And they discovered that the UK Fire Service throws away 700 tonnes a year of irreparable fire hoses. The same material is used in very high-end handbags, and the fire service pays over £400 a tonne to throw this stuff away. They've done a deal with the fire service to get those raw materials for the next 20 years for free. They turn them into these incredibly, high-end handbags, and then they give 50% of the profits back to the UK Fire Service charity. That's the kind of model that appeals to people from a commercial perspective, from a recycling, reuse perspective, from a doing good in society perspective. And I think we need a lot more of those. Going forward, I think a lot of people want to make sure that they're doing good for society when they're doing good for themselves. But we need to teach people how to do that. We need to teach people how to set up those ventures in a very practical way. How do you start a business in the social space? How do you crack through, the challenges you've got, break down the walls and barriers? And I think we've got the space in our education system today, in our schools, in our colleges, in our universities. We already have the space to do the teaching. And it's not the existing teachers who are going to teach us, or lecturers, who are going to teach us how to start those kinds of businesses. It's the people who are in that space. It's very unlikely that you're going to find very many university lecturers right now who can teach you about human augmentation. And the ones that can are on $5 million research contracts. So they don't want to go and do a few hours teaching. But getting people who are in the space to come in and talk about the difference between chemical enhancement of your brain, genetic enhancement of your body, or physically printing new limbs for yourself. We need to understand that this is a $1 trillion plus sector, as are all the others. But we need people from the sector teaching us how to do this stuff.
Seems to be quite an important point, is Bob, I suppose, when you're bringing people into to someone like Newham, is actually making sure that the companies that come in and want to invest have the best will in the world, that they are plugged into the community from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the success of our tech and creative and cultural industries depends on many, many great Londoners. About 250,000 Londoners, the last time I counted, are involved in those industries. We have about 17,000 students studying across London in tech and the wider digital sectors. But it is also important to think about the future as well, future talent, and connecting companies that might be new to the UK with that talent. So I'm glad to say that, there are great things happening at local levels as well. At London level, we are very super interested in bringing in young people into the digital industries. And it's one of those things that actually is really good for quite young people, age 16 plus, 16 to 24-year-olds in particular, to learn the skills needed for these new high-growth industries. It's happening here in Newham as well. Newham College has some great courses for 16 to 24-year-olds in particular to learn about how to work in these new industries. So I think that's fantastic. I think we're doing a lot to encourage more women into tech as well, as entrepreneurs, as company founders, not just working for the people. That's really important. And one of the greatest strengths of all of this city, which has been referred to before, is its diversity. And I don't mean just diversity of people's backgrounds and whatnot, but that diversity in itself brings diversity of talents and skills and mindsets, which is so valuable to business.
Can I just pick up on something you've said, Rohit, which I think is really interesting and important, is the idea that we're moving, technology is no longer just coding. Technology now requires extractor fans, it requires 3D printers, it requires space. Biotech requires a different spec of place that Shoreditch would have given us in the last 20 years, that Soho would have given us in the early days of sort of production and things. And so I think what we're finding now is that places like the Royal Docks are really going to attract the need for this new types of technology, biotech especially, and the sort of idea of IoT plugging in digital into products. You no longer can do that in a small sort of Georgian townhouse in the centre of London. So I think we're going to find places like the Royal Docks becoming very, very quickly relevant to those industries, which will be really interesting.
And do you think, you talked about working less, do you really think we're going to get to the point where people can clock off after? I mean, Jack Ma believes it, he's just retired, Alibaba, so 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, he thinks.
Yeah, wait till we see that happen.
Believe that even less than Apple telling you to switch your phone off.
Well, I mean, Jack Ma's in a different place, isn't he?
Yeah,
He's
sure,
got people
sure.
running all these businesses. He's at the point where, he could probably do that.
But there is a point where work and leisure is increasingly
we're
on
at
top
a
of
very
each
interesting point in time. What we don't know, every day we see a new forecast about will AI and the new, its disruptive cousins take away more jobs than they create, and we just don't know. We know that anyway, every year, 4 to 10% of the jobs that exist disappear anyway and get replaced by new ones. But what we don't know is how many will go. It's reasonable to expect that within 5 years, 50% of the roles people play today and the tasks they do will have been impacted by automation. I don't know whether that means 50% of jobs will disappear, and we don't know how many new jobs will be created, but we don't want to wait to find out. We need to be doing the work now to create those new roles, to create those new skill sets, and to be doing the experiment. And I love the point Joy made. I mean, if you look at the new businesses that are coming through, manufacturing is going to move to the heart of the city. From being like middle of nowhere, you're now seeing, people setting up vertical farms in old warehouses that used to be right in the middle of the city. You're seeing companies making 3D printed cars where they're only producing 2,500 cars from a very small footprint solution that could be here on the docks. You're seeing people like Riversimple and Saunders fundraise $1 million to start their car company, and they're going to probably be making 1,000 a year. They could be here. We're going to see these new industries with very small footprints, but actually doing manufacturing because it's very high tech. That could be very interesting because they're also going to be very clean. So, what the shape of this development is in 5, 10 years' time could change several times as the nature of the occupancy changes and the nature of manufacturing for the new industries changes. So I think we've got a really interesting challenge there about how do you make sure the architecture of these buildings is flexible enough to be able to extend and grow and change the shape of what happens within. And I think that makes it very vibrant in a sense.
I want to get the audience's view shortly, what do London business need to do to thrive in the next generation, but I do want to touch on, we've talked a lot about skilled workers. What about low-skilled workers? We had the Migration Advisory Committee coming out with proposals today that looks like it would be harder for the hospitality industry, for example. What does London as a city need to do to make sure it has enough workers at all sort of levels, at all parts of the economy?
Well, I think a lot of, if you like, jobs that require lower skills will get automated. It's just inevitable that people will start to automate. McDonald's, you're already seeing it.
Yep.
Other places, a lot of jobs where you used to have people doing a reasonable job, check-in assistant in a hotel, all of that sort of stuff is going to get automated. The challenge now is about giving ourselves permission to set a really ambitious target around how we raise skills across the whole of society. Because if we don't, we've got a massive challenge of people who are just left behind. So we have to look at taking everyone to a much higher level of education. And that starts with teaching people confidence in themselves and then getting into things like accelerated learning. If you look at the best model I've seen anywhere in the world is Bill Strickland, the Bidwell Training Centre in Pittsburgh, where they take people who come in as illiterate single parents or illiterate steel workers who've been made redundant, and within a year they're turning them out as development chefs for Heinz and development chemists working for Dow. And the first few months are just raising their self-confidence. Then they teach them some accelerated learning skills, and then they teach them the craft-related skills. We can do that here. We can absolutely take the best of what's out there, amplify it, and really have an agenda that says we're going to have nobody who's sitting there saying, I don't have the skills required for the future. I don't have the capability to create my own future. We can do it, or we can sit back and go, oh, we can't do that. And at the higher end, I think that my bigger concern is at the kind of mid-level, the people who, the bulk of their job gets automated and the company doesn't keep them. And they don't get what's replaced them. They don't get AI. And Finland's already kind of jumped on that one. So they've created a solution, an online solution, where they want the whole country to learn about AI, and they want 1% to learn about it this year, and it's free. And it's a really well-structured, set of learning modules designed for anyone to be able to access them. You don't have to have any deep expertise to go in. And we now recommend it to our clients. We're like, just go read that. Don't pay us to run you a 3-day program. You just go learn about AI from this system. Then let's have a chat about what you can do with it.
But as you look around the world, do you think that this is sort of the attractions of lifelong learning are not as well embedded in the UK as they are elsewhere in the world?
I think it's very spotty. I mean, there are certain countries that have done a fantastic job at lifelong or life-wide or whatever you want to call it, learning. Here we haven't paid enough attention to it, and I think we will count the cost if we don't really up our investment in that. And we have the facilities, and we have an awful lot of people out there who are retired or retiring, who have the skills and would love to go back in and teach and train. So I think we've got the resource pool to do it. We've got the facilities to do it. We need some pump priming and funding perspective. And then I think we could have some really ambitious targets around raising the skill levels at every level in society. And I'm sure employers would love the fact that they were having more highly trained workers coming into the workplace.
Yeah. Any points anybody like to raise? Issues of skills, infrastructure, what London needs to do better? There's a microphone if you just...
Or mime it,
hold on for one.
whichever you want to do.
Just on the second row, please, Emma. Can you say where you're from as well, please?
I'm from Holiday Inn Express Excel. It's a hotel nearby. I work there and I live in Newham. And I had a question for the mayor, being in the room. So given there's so many businesses coming here and infrastructure-wise, would we have more hospitals, schools, and is there any plans to add to the area in terms of public services as well?
It wasn't really if you're happy to answer.
I'll just answer really briefly. Obviously, in terms of our regeneration team and our anticipating what's coming down the line in the borough, of course, we look at the round in terms of the infrastructure needs and working with partners at the GLA and partners linked to the Royal Docks Enterprise Zone Project Board. We're making sure that we've got the infrastructure in place to help support businesses, as well as ensuring that the infrastructure with regards to schools, hospitals are all in place as well.
Thank you. Joy, would you add to that? I mean, it's obviously got to be part of the master plan. You can't make places unless they've got the full sort of suite of services.
I mean, without giving away anything that's sort of work in progress, there is a fantastic plan that's in development for the Royal Docks. I think it's extremely compelling and broad, and will be really exciting as that's delivered across the Royal Docks. There's a long-term delivery plan which is coming out soon, and I think that's going to be communicated very widely and broadly. Just generally in the Royal Docks, there is so much investment going in by the government from a Newham perspective, from a GLA perspective, inward investment with companies like ABP and others that are coming in. And I think that the hope certainly is that, as the tide goes up, all boats rise with that tide, and the infrastructure will meet that investment that's coming in. Personally, the Royal Docks as a place, and working with Newham and the GLA is the most exciting project that I've been involved in terms of areas regenerating in London in 20 years. It is a really exciting story that's unveiling here.
But Bob, I guess one big question that investors will always come back to with you is where is the infrastructure? And if the infrastructure, if the spades are already in the ground on things like Crossrail and so on, then that is more likely to get people to write the checks.
Yeah, well, having been involved in this area for quite some time, I actually can say a lot about infrastructure now. I wasn't able to say so much back in 2006 when I first worked down here, but now, you know, the transport infrastructure is incredible. You know, the airport has been outstandingly successful. I mean, now it's connected to 40 different destinations across Europe. I'm going to the US and going to Dubai, I think, next, which is quite incredible. I mentioned earlier, there's a great business tourism offer now in Newham because it's hosting London's major convention centre and all the amazing accommodation around that. So I mean, for us, business tourism is incredibly important as an industry. We compete quite fiercely with other European cities for that business. So to have the infrastructure available in places like Newham is great for London.
Okay. Any more questions? Not for the gentleman on the front row, please. If it could be for one of the three rather than the mayor, that would be very helpful. There's a microphone coming.
I'm an architect, and I'm very concerned about infrastructure. I'm also concerned about gentrification. We talked about King's Cross. We're here now. These areas were, 20 years ago, they were affordable areas. They were almost uninhabited areas. They've now been gentrified to a point where the young people that you are trying to attract, that you're talking about to come into these digital businesses, cannot afford £500,000 for a one-bedroom flat. 20 years ago, Victorian houses in London were a tenth of what they're worth now. That one-bedroom flat at £500,000, is it going to be worth £5 million in 20 years or more? Yeah. What can we do as part of the so-called infrastructure to ensure that the young people don't get driven away and you get a brain drain, essentially? Yeah. You know, a development like this, I'm thinking like Cadbury, could the developer not look to, and similarly at King's Cross with Google, could the developer not look to provide a chunk of affordability housing that young people can afford? And that's a question for all the panel.
I think there are examples. I think there's one example I remember. I think Deloitte put in just not permanent accommodation, but some temporary accommodation for graduate recruits, I think around the Olympic Park a couple of years ago. But it's only a tiny sliver. So, Rohit, what would you say? Does it become? Do we need a new Bourneville? You know, the new sort of responsibility of the employer, or not?
I think you need a mix of different experiments right now to see what might create the most affordable living space going forward, because there's a temptation to sort of put all your eggs into one horse or into one basket. Mix my metaphors there. You know, to really kind of say that's the one, that's the answer. I think we've got to try a lot of different things. Maybe some of the stuff we need to look at is the 3D printing of homes, which is incredibly cheap now compared to normal approaches. The rapid construction, again, you see companies in China, you know, building 57-story buildings in 17 days. Or is it 19? They prefabricate everything and they build it. So they can build cheaper, more affordable homes. They might only be starter units for people, but I think we can get a lot of that in quite quickly to get people into safe, decent, sustainable living spaces to start off with and feel like that part of their basic needs are met. And I think we could do that a lot quicker than we are now. We still have an awful lot of empty properties around London that I think we could repurpose quite quickly. If we brought that mindset to it. And I think it is about that, giving ourselves permission to think radically differently, to almost say, you know, if we were China, how would we do this? If we were Dubai, how would we approach this? Where, you know, people tend to kind of go to solve the problem quite quickly and then deal with all the objections en route, whereas most of what we do is kind of led by how do we kind of deal with all the objections first, the process, and then do it. And our processes just take too long. I think we need some, in the same way as, you know, we've got some disruption going on in all sorts of sectors, we need massive disruption in our process of the approving planning and making sure that what we're creating is safe and sustainable and environmentally friendly, but getting it built much faster.
Is it the planners, do you think?
Is it the planners? You know, I think it's really interesting. I think personally, I would say the tide is probably shifting on the development side. It's abhorrent to, I think, develop without having a sort of thought about, are we doing some good here? And you know, Roxana has you know, very, very loudly sort of set out her stall for Newham, and you know, a very strong commitment to the local people being at the absolute heart of everything that happens in Newham. I think you'll hear that very loud and clearly across the Royal Docks generally. From my personal experience, and now it's my turn to plug a book that I've written called Know Your Place.
Yep.
I can tell you chapter 2 on that book is called Do Good. And I think you have a mix of developers, and the points in this book really start talking about people who are shaping cities, sort of 7 things that they're doing to, in effect, create change. And one of them is doing good, not just CSR, some throwing an event to raise some money, but actually saying how can we actually impact the community in a positive way. Not having consideration for that these days, I would say, is not very enlightened. So more and more, certainly across London, we're seeing developers having an incredible investment into how can we do good, not just build space, but actually do good for communities. So I'm very optimistic that that's now becoming, housekeeping, that you just normal business day to day in creating cities.
Bob, I feel we should have got a book ready.
Yeah, I think it's high time. Yeah.
Right at the back, please.
Hi, my name's Tom from Contented Brothers. I don't have a book to push, but I am on the London and Partners Growth Programme, and for a virtual reality training app that we've just launched. So I'm kind of on message, I think.
Great.
One of the things that I found myself doing as part of the London and Partners Programme the other day was sorry to raise the B word again, but a Brexit round table, which was fascinating with quite a lot of leaders of industry, and it feels pertinent for where we are. There were some quite chilling statistics around the shortfall in actual construction workers that could be coming down the line. So I have a question really for the panel, which is, are there going to be the people to realise all these wonderful plans that everyone's talking about? And how are we going to automate the bricklaying?
Well, I mean, you've already got robots that will strip down an old building, will do bricklaying. There's a system called Hadrian that lays 2,000 bricks an hour. That's like 16 times faster than a human. So, you can go that route if you want to. My suspicion is we won't see that much of a shortage of construction workers, that we'll either have people retrain into some of those skills if we have a construction boom again, but also you will find people still being allowed to come into the country to work on those kinds of projects. And I think of all the sectors we're looking at, base level construction workers won't be the challenge. My theory in construction is it's the project management, the engineering, the design level that we won't necessarily have the expertise in how to build using the new techniques and new approaches that will allow us to deliver this stuff faster and cheaper.
On the third row, please. Yeah.
Thomas Chan. I've been East London for 30 years. My question is very simple. In the absence of the ex-chancellor of Exchequer, if the Secretary of State for Education is in this room here, I want to ask the panelist, how can he or she future-proof the next generation so we can actually deliver what the panelists have suggested?
In terms of the education policy and so on. Yeah. I think I touched on that a bit. It's sort of opening it up.
We've got an obsession at the moment with how the education system should be, and we've got into a situation where the politicians are designing the delivery mechanisms almost. I think there's a massive amount of learning out there about how you educate, kids for the future. Do you educate them as future economic units of production, or do you educate them as citizens and focus on their total well-being and developing them and their capabilities? And again, I hate to point out Finland, but there's such massive differences between the happiness of kids at school, the suicide rates, the way they teach. Finnish kids have 15 minutes in every hour for socialization and play. Not just because they're obsessed with play, but they understand how important that is in development and processing the learning. A lot of Finnish kids' classrooms only have 2 desks. The kids work on the floor, they work on beanbags, they work where they need to. They work in the environment that best suits them. And I think there's a lot of learning we can do from all over the world about how to remodel the education system quickly, starting with giving kids belief in themselves, which is, I think, the baseline. Without that, they don't get the other stuff. And then bringing in the accelerated learning techniques. And alongside teaching the maths and English and those things, we have to teach them the skills they need to ensure that they can move from unknown job to unknown job in the future. Things like collaboration, things like problem solving, things like scenario thinking, things like empathy, things like self-regulation, all of those kinds of things that are really important. Things like sleep, teaching kids how to sleep and how to wind down, and to do all those sorts of things. The results are incredible. My son's school did it, and for the period after they ran this project, the kids just were so much better. They were so much nicer. Like in the school, the teachers were saying it, all sorts of things improved because the kids were having slightly more sleep each night and coming in slightly less stressed.
Great. On the front row, please. And one more question after that, if someone has a something burning to say. Yes, please.
Yes, my name is Kim Teo. I'm a solicitor in a small practice. This question is towards the Mayor of Newham as well as the panel. I have some clients that they work in the city quite well to do, earn quite a more or less six-figure salary. The minute they have family, reluctantly they have to move out, go to outer borough or suburb area where they can send their kid to a better school. So, to the panel and mayor, whether you can have any plan to build a better school within this area, so that to maintain or keep high earner in this borough.
Okay. I don't think the mayor is here to answer any more questions. Particularly, the questions are for the panel. So I don't know if you want to address that, Joy. In terms of schools, it's the school infrastructure again.
Yeah, look, I think it's really hard. I think the education question is a big one everywhere. Rohit did a really good job talking about, how do we shift away from just being about the R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, and actually just start to focus on transferable skills, as I would call them, skills that I went from finance into tech, and then I became a place brand consultant, which is a very funny thing. Funnily enough, in America, I would say the transferable skill that was hammered into you for 17 years was actually problem solving, was the sort of, in every type of class, you really do look very hard at problem solving. And I think that's where you get people going to consulting and then going to tech, et cetera. So I'm not sure I can really answer the question for Newham particularly, but I would certainly say the future in this country is going to be about looking at those transferable skills that we can give our children, that they can operate across a sort of movable feast of industries over time.
Wonderful, thank you. Gentlemen,
hi there.
This is the last questions.
Max Farrell from Farrell's Architects for this project, and I just thought it was worth pointing out, for those of you who don't know, that actually this project is quite pioneering in terms of modern methods of manufacturing, and all the panels that you see on the elevations of the buildings were made in a factory in Stoke and brought here and assembled on site, which meant we achieved record times to build all the buildings that you see in a little more than 9 months. So it's already sort of practicing what we preach when it comes to using technology and new types of skills to improve construction processes. Not really a question.
Fantastic.
It's worth pointing out.
Not a question at all, actually.
No, it's not.
Thank you for that point. And just very, very briefly from the panel, what is if we're thinking a generation out, what's the one thing that London and London businesses have to do to get right now so that we can be thriving a generation? Is it the skills agenda?
For me, it's the investment in people.
Yeah, people.
Yeah, people for me as well, but bringing them together. Give them spaces, third spaces, where they can actually hang out and collaborate and exchange ideas.
Giving people space to be great entrepreneurs and continue to push technology forward is what I would say. That's what we're best at. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much to the three of you. The room's hotted up as we've talked. I found that very interesting. I hope everyone here did. Thank you once again to Rohit, Joy, and Bob. We hand back to Georgina.
Very many thanks to our panel and, of course, to you in the audience for asking questions. And they are going to be around. There'll be champagne and canapes in a moment. And, of course, you can always grab the panel and ask your question if you didn't get an opportunity there. We're very nearly finished this evening's content. As I say, more drinks to come. But before that, I'd very much like to welcome the CEO of ABP London, and that is Nancy Shue, to the stage for her closing remarks. Thank you, Nancy.
Good evening, everyone. And on behalf of ABP London and the chairman, Mr. Xu Weiping, I thank you all for coming and joining us tonight. And I know that today is probably a bit getting late, but maybe after following the first speaker, which is Mr. George Osborne, and he was showing that the picture and CGI of the newspaper, but maybe you can find out the second page, which is the truth and the reality of that picture CGI, which is becoming from the dream and becoming the truth. And back to the theme of tonight's discussion, I think the topics for future is never be a small topic, and will also bring us a lot of sparkling and bright ideas. But I'm also very grateful to all of our speakers and panelists for their insight into business success. I would like to add 1 or 2 points from my own. But before I look to the future, I would like to spend a moment or two looking at the past, because we are celebrating China's National Days and the 69 years since the People's Republic of China began. And also, 2018 is also 40 years since the start of the reform and development policy when China opened up its market to the world. So what is future? I think the future is dream and also make dream become true. So China's journey over the past few decades since then has been remarkable, and the success are well known, and so there's no need for me to repeat. And but what I should say is the opening up of China to market focus helped privately owned enterprises like ABP and to flourish. Firstly, in China, and then for us to look to expand outside Asia, like UK. So now we can make our dream. We start our path to find new opportunities, and the UK and London in particular presented us with those opportunities that we were seeking. We found London to have an open economic that allows companies from outside of the UK, such as us, to compete in the fair way. So we received encouragement from government, national level, London World, and local here in Yuan, to support us to invest here in the Royal Dock. And the London's business community has also welcomed us very well, and it's an organic open market. ABP took the bold move to expand out of China and Topcom here to the East London. In return, we have worked very hard to create London's next business district that will provide a platform and the gateway, which was mentioned and repeat and emphasized many times, to markets for London's business to trade here and worldwide. Actually, this is two-way tickets. ABP Robert Dock will create thousands of jobs for the people of London and for Yuan. We promised we'll complete our first phase on time, and as you can see, we are doing that, what we said. And I think this is with Chinese speed and UK quality. Therefore, I believe ABP win this opportunity. It is not just because ABP, it's also because the win-win, such a win-win business oppositions. So for business looking to the future, it is clear that future of London is in the east of the city. The Royal Docks is changing fast, and we are welcoming those business from across London who want to embrace the future, who can see the value in great community and connectivity with a highly skilled talent pool. On the very just close next door to the doorstep. So back to today's event's topic, the theme. In the future, how we face into the every changing global economy. How should we deal with it? As the business point of view, I would suggest cooperation and dedication and mutual benefit. So just like the China-UK golden era, the power of the partnership. Thanks very much.
Many thanks to Nancy Xu and, of course, to all of you. And it's time now for us to raise a glass until this event ends at around about 9:30, a big glass to the Royal Albert Dock.